Okay. Is this thing going? Alright. To start things off, I am Tyler. I was the leader of the Defenders until the team was divided. I devoted myself to tracking down every member of the rebels and bringing them in to claim justice for the brutal murder of Bean. However, my mindset managed to be changed throughout my hunt. It was becoming clear that events were falling into place, and thus, Lucifer himself came to have a talk with me. Knowing the inevitable was approaching, he told me everything about the Infinity Stones, the Great Reality War, and chaos. Shortly after that, I was forced to go into hiding. I want to get this out there, simply because chaos is returning to enact his omen of Ragnarok upon the universe, but needs the last Infinity Stone, the Time Stone, to complete this resurrection of whatever he's trying to do. I hid the Time Stone away where it will never be found. If I am to die by any means, I want the events of what I'm about to relay to reach the right people. To set the stage of the major events of the Reality War, I need to introduce the key players of that war. The first major player was Chaos, the literal incarnate of chaos that dictated the plane of quote-unquote existence before our known universe. Cataclysmic chaos that showed no mercy to those caught in its wake. Chaos wore armor that no existing weapon could even hope to breach. But, much like the chaos he incarnated, would strike down any opposition that would dare stand in his way. Chaos led the militaristic kingdom, cleverly named Keandrathal, which the very concept of light was completely foreign to this hellscape. But, on the other hand, is Zenith, or what we would call God. The kingdom of Osvoria sprouted out of the darkest parts of the void. Bathed in the most goldest of light, Osvoria would rise to stand on its own without much competition, until Keandrathal made itself known to the Golden Kingdom. At Zenith's side was Lucifer, a warrior and a very trusted ally. Lucifer commanded Osvoria's elite military in the event that it was ever needed. The most skilled warriors the universe would ever see. How the two kingdoms would meet would be a complete accident. One soldier from each kingdom would cross paths with each other while out on a scouting expedition. Unaware that each other had existed, the two soldiers remained at a standstill, not really sure if they should take any action. The two soldiers had backed away from each other and returned to each kingdom to inform their kings of their findings. Upon learning that there was a fully functioning kingdom existing within his realm, Chaos would immediately begin organizing his troops to engage one massive push, to squander out any little shred of light that would exist. Not taking any chances, Zenith began preparing his defenses in the event of an attack. Which would honestly be a good call considering what would come next. The cap would eventually break when the first waves of Chaos's army began lining outside Osvoria's walls. Zenith attempted to make peace with Chaos in the hopes that both kingdoms can exist in harmony. Hell, at the very least, exist in peace. Chaos, however, was not taking the concept of peace into mind. Chaos would make the very first move by having his front line fire shots into Osvoria. Little did Chaos or Zenith know, this would start the bloodiest conflict in the known multiverse. The Reality War had 4 major battles, and the major turning point happening in one of those battles. Dawn of the Reality War, the Knights of Chaos, the Battle of the Aether, and the Reality War's final day. The dawn of the Reality War was the very first day of the Reality War. Chaos's forces pushed towards the kingdom walls. Zenith's defenses held strong against Chaos. Zenith's forces finally caught a moment to push a counterattack, for which they were mostly successful. The intention wasn't fully to push Chaos back to his own kingdom, but to simply allow Zenith's forces to fully organize for a much stronger assault. Both Zenith and Chaos were giving energy to their armies. Zenith through his golden divinity and Chaos with the extremely volatile chaotic energy that he irradiates. The first day ultimately ended with many casualties on both sides. Those of the fallen would be replaced with brand new soldiers ready to fight. Zenith and Lucifer, staying behind the main lines, began to formulate strategies with one final fallback if the tide were to completely shift against them. The most worrying fact was that Zenith and Lucifer would eventually have to face Chaos in battle. Chaos would begin gathering energy for one massive assault that ideally would wipe Azoria out completely. The war had raged on for what seemed like weeks at this point. There was no way of telling since, well, time didn't exist in the void. Zenith and Chaos would eventually share blows in multiple smaller battles. One clash in particular would distort the void and create a small region that eventually would become the concept of night and day. The Knights of Chaos was the bloodiest battle of the entire reality war. Chaos had finally made use of that energy he had been storing and created 6 of the most fearsome knights to ever walk the concept of the multiverse. Equipped with the same armor and wielding dark scythes, the Chaos Knights would step onto the battlefield and began to easily cut down the forces of Zenith. Azoria began losing ground with these knights on the field, so Zenith and Lucifer would have to take to the battle and take them out. While Zenith and Lucifer were gods, the knights did put up one hell of a fight. Zenith and Lucifer would take heavy damage before all the knights would fall. The damage had been done, however. While Azoria wasn't losing as much ground as before, with Zenith tending to his wounds, the forces of Azoria would have to work double time to simply hold the line. Knowing that Zenith and Lucifer would be temporarily out of commission, Chaos and some of his forces would make their way to a location Chaos thought only he knew about. While he tried to sneak away from the battle, multiple Azorian knights were able to follow behind Chaos. Where Chaos would go could easily turn the tides of the war depending on who succeeded in the battle. Finally healing sufficiently from their wounds, Zenith and Lucifer would catch wind of where Chaos had snuck off to, and it was the worst case scenario. Zenith and Lucifer would descend onto the battlefield and cut down Chaos' forces until none remained. Chaos had set off to the jaws to infinity. The Battle of the Aether was the biggest turning point of the reality war. Zenith and his forces made their way to the jaws to infinity, a gap in the fabric of the void which acted as a window to the infinite universes. If Chaos could harness power from the infinite universes, Chaos could become unstoppable. Zenith's forces would launch a brutal assault on the remaining forces that followed Chaos. Taken by complete surprise, Chaos would have to stop the procedure and aid his forces in battle. Zenith and Lucifer clashed once again with Chaos, while Zenith's forces took care of the rest of Chaos' forces. Despite halting his procedure, Chaos had gained enough power to be an army of his own. Each clash would make brand new tears in reality, but with Chaos becoming so powerful, these tears would become amplified to an extreme. The mix of day, night, and the jaws to infinity would become known as the Aether. Chaos knew that he wouldn't win this battle, so he would unleash a chaotic blast that would take out a good chunk of Zenith's forces before retreating from the Aether. Chaos unwittingly would cause his own downfall and ultimately make him lose the reality war. Zenith now had access to the jaws to infinity, and would use this access to request aid from the mass infinity. What the infinity would grant Zenith were 6 crystals of varying colors. Zenith had been granted the Infinity Stones. Chaos hadn't taken much damage from the Battle of the Aether, and it'd only be a matter of time before he would launch his next assault. With the new energy he harnessed, he would create more Chaos Knights to aid him in one final battle with Azoria. Fearing that Zenith would still be at the jaws to infinity, Chaos and his knights would make their way back to the Aether. What Chaos didn't know was that this was his final march. The final day of the reality war would be the final battle of the war. Equipped with the Infinity Stones, which Zenith and Lucifer didn't know how to utilize, Zenith would forge them into a sword. Zenith would also revive his soldiers with the stones and create new knights to counter Chaos's. Chaos would soon reappear at the jaws to infinity with his knights, and without hesitation, both sides would clash in battle. Strengthened by the stones, Asuria's forces would easily hold their own against a small army of Chaos Knights, while Zenith and Lucifer met Chaos in battle one final time. The three would clash in a spectacle of power. But Chaos would start to understand his biggest mistake was leaving the jaws to infinity to Zenith. With whatever power Zenith had acquired, Chaos couldn't simply keep up. Clash after clash would become harder and harder on Chaos, losing energy and strength. Sensing the end was near, Zenith and Lucifer would swiftly bring Chaos to his knees. Being brought to his knees would almost end the war. However, his full eradication would completely end it. Beaten and tired, Chaos could only laugh as the last of his knights would fall. The reality war was almost over. Not wanting to take any chances with him in the future, Zenith, by victory, would sentence Chaos to death for the hundreds of Oswarian casualties. Plunging the Infinity Stone infused sword into Chaos's chest, Zenith would ask Chaos if he had any final words, and Chaos would most certainly give some. For you may win this battle now, but my essence will never die, and Chaos will haunt your creation. For I will return one day, and when that day would come, I will bring about the total eradication of everything. I shall return, and I shall bring with me Ragnarok. Zenith would plunge the sword fully into Chaos, erupting into a blast of light. From Chaos's form shot hundreds to thousands of galaxies, stars, and planets. Time and space began to coexist at that moment. The universe, for what we know it, had been born from the essence of Chaos. Completely erasing Chaos's physical form, Zenith would utter a prophecy to counter Chaos's omen of return. Should Chaos return, may those blessed by the infinity stand to strike him down. Kayandrathal had been sealed away outside of time, becoming the Dark Aether. One planet would remain at the site of creation, a planet that would come to be known as Earth.